Hello. I feel so free. I'm trying something today. What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut version of this week's episode where I'm going to talk all about designing your office, like from scratch. Even if you've never designed anything in your life, interior design-wise, this episode is for you. If you are listening in to the audio-only version of this podcast, I will explain everything thoroughly for you. But if you are watching the video version of the extended cut of this week's episode, I am definitely not minimally editing this one. I'm going to show a lot of B-roll video footage explaining details of what I talk about in this episode. So some of you might be interested in hopping over to the video version of this episode. I've linked to that in the show notes if you are interested. Is it just me and my wishful thinking? Or is in-person therapy having like a little comeback moment? Like, has it been long enough now of like primarily teletherapy services that it's kind of like retro and cool to do in-person services? Let me know in the comments below because I actually have no idea if that's true or not. But if you are on the in-person train bandwagon with me and you've signed a lease for an office space that's unfurnished, you're going to need to design that bad boy. Bad boy is not a phrase I usually would use, but I'm just kind of feeling sassy today because I'm standing up, I guess. And I'm kind of sick. If you can hear it in my voice, I'm fine. So in today's episode, I'm going to offer all my best tips and tricks to help you design your empty office space to make it a lovely and practical therapy office for you to meet with your clients. In addition to offering my tips of what you want to incorporate in your design, in the extended cut version of this episode, I'm also going to emphasize a lot the how of designing your office, because you can actually find quite a bit of information now on the internet about like what to include in your therapy office. It's great. I'm so glad it's there. And it's also really helpful to know, like, how do I actually implement that? Like, right now, when I'm putting my office together, how do I do this? So we're going to dive into all of those tips today. So far in my career as a private practice owner, I've now designed 2 different therapy office spaces completely from scratch. And each of those experiences were like very different ends of the spectrum. The first office that I designed was my very first full-time office lease, and I had a very tight budget. And this office that I'm in now was a bit later in my career, and I had a lot more flexibility in my budget to make it really what I wanted. But in both cases, I used the same design principles, and one was just guided a lot more by a strict budget, and the other I gave myself a lot more freedoms if I wanted to splurge on something a little bit more that kind of fit what I was looking for. Also, it's important to note that for this second office, I had the help of a friend who is an interior designer. Thank you, friend. The first office that I designed, I did it all by myself. So no matter where you're coming at this from, the tips that I'm offering in this episode hold steady in all of these different situations, and I hope sharing them with you is helpful as you design your office space. As I record this episode, I am operating under the assumption that, at least for most of us, signing our very first full-time lease and designing an office space, we're probably operating under a pretty tight budget. So I'm keeping that at the forefront of my mind as I offer you these tips in this video. Okay, so let's dive into my tips for the how and what of designing your very own office space from scratch. Step number 1, and please do not skip this step. Set a budget. Set a budget. I mean, let's go by that rule of thumb for any kind of business venture you might be undertaking, but definitely when it comes to furnishing an office, it is so easy to just blow a ton of money on it. But you actually don't have to blow a ton of money in order to make a great office space. So if you start by setting a budget and then just keep coming back to it, stick to it, I'm going to give you some tips along the way to help you stick by your budget. Then at the end, you can have a fully furnished office that you're happy with, and also, your wallet can be happy with you as well. As I mentioned, you can easily blow a ton of money furnishing an office. So I'm a little hesitant to say, like, here's how much you should budget, because it also varies on like where you live and preferences and things like that. But I know it can be helpful to have a little bit of a ballpark in mind. So here's some kind of general ballpark numbers to keep in mind as you design an office. And granted, this is a single room office, not like an office suite or something like that. As I mentioned, I fully furnished my first office in 2017 for $1,200, and that felt a little bit like a tight budget, I won't lie, but I definitely did it, and I felt like my office was full, like it didn't feel like it was missing stuff in it. And I'm aware of inflation, so I looked it up in the inflation calculator, and by today's dollars, that would be a little over $1,500 budget. So a little ballpark, if you're on a tight budget, I would say probably $1,000 as like a lower end minimum budget to completely from scratch furnish and decorate, design the entire office. And you can definitely do it in $1,000, but it's also going to require a bit of scrappiness, a little bit of deal hunting. I mean, it could honestly be less than $1,000 if you are real scrappy, you are good at thrifting, or you're that friend that like, you know how to reach out to the other friend that has that nice couch or whatever to say they're replacing their couch and you can snag it from them, or, you know, you can get crafty with it. But I'd say generally for most of us, $1,000 minimum price point for budgeting your entire office design, I think is probably the lower end of things. And then going up from there, again, loosely, if you have more like $2,000 available to budget for your entire office, it's going to feel like it's manageable, though you're still definitely going to be buying budget type items, you know, probably shopping at places like IKEA or Wayfair, lower end items, or Amazon, places where you can find kind of deals on your furniture. You're probably not going to be furnishing your office with Restoration Hardware furniture, let's be honest. I mean, Restoration Hardware, that's like, can you even buy a desk for $2,000? I don't know. I don't shop there. And then once you start to slide past $2,000 or $2,500, I think it starts to feel a bit more roomy in the budget. Like if you like shopping at a little bit nicer places, or you want your things to be solid wood, or that like higher end upholstery, you know, you're shopping at like Crate & Barrel, West Elm, things like that, you're probably going to need to slide past $2,000 and maybe easily past $5,000 if you want all of your furniture to be a little bit of that nicer, higher end quality stuff. Again, most of us are probably not filling our office with like Restoration Hardware stuff even later in our career, but if you want to, you can slide your budget upwards accordingly. Probably most of us are going to be living in that like $1,000 to $4,000 range to furnish our entire office. But no matter what your budget is, I'm telling you, set a budget from the beginning. If you don't set a budget, your money will just fly out of your bank account and you're going to wonder where it all went. So set a budget and keep coming back to it. Okay, the next tip that I have is to pick a design style. This is something that I wish people talked more about in the content that I find about designing your therapy office. You know, you find a lot of information about like, you know, make sure your therapist chair is comfortable and like make sure the flow of the room is nice in these ways. But like, also, if your furniture looks like each piece comes from like a completely different design style, it starts to look a little bit cheap, a little bit kitschy, a little bit cluttered and haphazard. And, you know, if your design style is kitschy, then be kitschy, embrace it. If it's intentional, I fully support it because there's a vibe to that. It's true. But if your space is looking kind of kitschy just because you didn't really have a design direction going, I can help you with that. Now, I know many of you listening have an artistic eye. You're good at your own kind of interior design, say in your home or things like that, in which case you probably don't need my help figuring out design style. Just skip this step and keep going. But I know there are many therapists out there who have no idea what I'm talking about, maybe haven't really thought about design style, even when it comes to things like, you know, picking furniture in your home. So if that's you, I got some tips for you. So I would start by just scrolling through a website that goes over the most popular design styles with a photo representing each one, and just see if any of those images catches your eye a little bit more than some of the other images. If you want some help with this, I found a website that I thought was simple and easy to use that I'll link to below, where it goes over 20 common design styles with a photo for each. If you scroll through and there's one or two photos that really stands out to you, just let that be your design style. Now, keep in mind, the goal here isn't to look for the photo that has like which specific furniture pieces or layouts or anything like that you're looking for in your therapy office. We're looking for like the vibe, like the feel. Like I want my clients to feel that way when they're in my office, even if, that picture doesn't have a therapist chair or a couch or, whatever else you might be putting in your actual therapy office. We're just looking for the general flavor of the style. And then once you find the design style that catches your eye the most for your therapy office design, then you can do a Google search and type in something like essentials of blank interior design. So let me illustrate this with an example. If I type into a Google search, quote, essentials of modern interior design, assuming that the design style I chose was modern design, a result shows up that says this: characteristics of modern interior design style. And then here's some bullet points. Simple and unadorned. Natural materials and earthy tones. Clean lines. Uncluttered spaces. Natural light and unadorned windows. Simple functional furniture. Monochrome color palette. They start to kind of give you a little formula for how to do the modern design style that you liked from that picture that you checked out on that website. Now listen, I know I've already offered a lot of work and we haven't even started with the getting to actually designing your office part, but all of this will make the rest of it feel much smoother. But if everything I just said still feels overly complicated, here's a shorthand strategy that you can use. Choose a primary upholstery color, choose a primary wood stain or wood wash, choose a metal finish, choose an accent color or two, max 3, and choose an accent texture. You can even kind of copy somebody else's style. Like if you liked one of those photos from earlier, you can look and see what's the primary upholstery color? What kind of wood stain do they use? What kind of textures do I see in this picture? And just, if you like it, just write it down, copy it. Making note of these things is super helpful for when it comes time to choosing furniture and decor for your office. You can just check that each piece you purchase fits neatly into these categories somewhere. It makes the process a lot easier. So as an example, here's my general design approach to my current therapy office. The office design style as a whole is primarily beachy inspired with like a teensy bit of boho thrown in there. The primary upholstery color is kind of a cream off-white color. The primary wood stain or wood wash is a light washed wood. The touches of metal in my office are all copper, and my accent colors are primarily blush with a little bit of blue and a teensy bit of green, which is mostly plants. And the accent texture is rattan. How do you say that? I don't know. I have this coffee table, whatever this thing is that you would call my coffee table, and I don't know, my trash can is jute, so those feel a little bit similar. If you want to get real fancy with this part, you can create a mood board, but if you don't know what a mood board is or you don't want to deal with it, you can skip it. You really can skip it. If you just follow these rules, you'll be good to go. Okay, this next step is very important. I cannot emphasize this enough, and that is to take measurements of your office. Imagine that. And I mean measure your office. Like every little teensy thing that is measurable, go ahead and measure it. So not just key obvious things like, how long are your walls, but also things like how tall are your ceilings? Where are your outlets? Measure where the outlets are compared to some reference point, like a corner where two walls meet. How big is your door? Where does the door land when it swings open? Does it swing in or does it swing out? If you have any windows, how high are they off the ground? And then how tall is the entire window? Any little detail that you can measure, just go ahead and measure it. You will be glad you did it later. I'm telling you, even like an inch difference can, make or break a furniture purchase. So it's good to have the measurements at hand if it's possible for you to get them. Okay, this next tip might feel a little bit advanced because most people don't talk about doing this, but I highly recommend this step, and that's to use a design app to design your office digitally. Personally, I use RoomSketcher only because it's what I found back in 2016 when I first started designing my first office. And then I just keep using the same app ever since then because I already know how to use it. There's probably better ones, to be honest, but they have a free version. So I'll link to that one below. You can do all of this without paying a dime. Pretty sure they have a paid version. If there's stuff in there that you want to pay for, go for it. But I've managed for now years using just the free version, not only to design my therapy offices, but like my houses. And my husband and I have moved houses so many times in the last several years that I must have used this app to design like 8 different spaces at this point. So it works fine. Here's the thing. Designing an office in an app like RoomSketcher is work. I won't lie. Like, you're going to spend a little while just even getting the measurements in there to put the walls in the room, let alone if you want to try to like match the paint color and the flooring and all of that. It's going to take you a minute. But let me emphasize, all of this happens before you've even spent a dime on designing your office. And once you get this all set up, it's really going to help your office design like sparkle. It's going to be great. Now, because I'm not a professional designer, I do cheat on this part. I'm not expecting you to like Photoshop into RoomSketcher like the exact furniture pieces you're going to buy like that. I think designers do that, and I'm not a designer. I just use whatever they have in the app available as kind of placeholder furniture so I can get a sense of the general flow of the room. Like, I don't have to pick out the exact couch. I just need to put a couch in the room and try putting it here on this wall. What about this wall? What if I move it over there? So effectively, each piece of furniture just acts as a placeholder for, whatever piece of furniture you actually end up buying in the end. I spent a while in this phase plugging in furniture I think I might like in my office and just trying different configurations of the furniture. Maybe the desk goes here. I might need a lamp over there. What about this bookshelf? And then, okay, let me reconfigure those things in a different order. Let's see how that looks. And let me tell you, it's a lot cheaper and easier to go ahead and click on a digital bookshelf and drag it over there than it is to buy a bookshelf, put it in your office, and then change your mind and put it in a new spot, or worse, return it because it didn't quite work. As you start plugging furniture into your digital office in a place like RoomSketcher, think about your specific clients because, what's going to work for me working with adult individual clients in therapy is going to look totally different than what you might need if you did play therapy with kids, for example. So mentally walk through a therapy session and think of what sorts of things you tend to use, how you use them, and make sure you're incorporating those things into your design. You can take it all the way down to things like, is it common for you to want to reach out for a handout or pull out a questionnaire on a clipboard for a client to fill out in the middle of session? Think of those things and think like, where would I put that? Where would it be accessible for me to grab it? Or, if you're doing play therapy, do you need room on the floor to play with your kids? Or if you do group therapy sessions, do you need to make sure there's enough seating for everybody? Whatever kind of unique, specific therapy work you do, think of what variables you need to include in your office design. This also includes things that might be specific to your location. Like, I live in San Diego, so honestly, I don't even think about this, but if you live in somewhere that's rainy, maybe like, do you need a spot for people to put their umbrellas? Or if it's like super cold, do you need a coat rack for people to offload their layers? Honestly, I've never lived anywhere where it snows, so I don't know what you need to do, but whatever those things are, take them into account. So as you keep all of these things in mind, just keep dropping furniture pieces into the app and shuffling them around. Or if you're not using an app like RoomSketcher, you can draw out your office and then just, draw different renderings of how you position the furniture to see what you think. And as you're doing that, here are some elements of designing a therapy office to keep in mind. These are the things that you can find a lot of other people talking about on the internet. And I covered most of them in my archaic 2018 video where I talked about office design as well. The first thing to consider, kind of basic design rule, is traffic flow. Is it easy to get in and out? Is it easy for your clients to access the seating? Of course, some of this goes all the way down to things like, are things up to like fire safety standards? Like, is there a clear and free path to get in and out of your office? But also from a therapeutic safety point of view, if things flow smoothly and it's obvious where the client chair is versus the therapist chair, what route to take to get in and out, and also if the clients can visualize where the door is, that can also help them feel a lot safer in your space. And something to consider when it comes to your client's seating is if you can have it pushed all the way against the wall, that offers a sense of support and safety. And it's also helpful for your client seating to give your clients an option for how close they end up sitting next to you. If it's a couch, then they can either come closer or further away. Or if it's some sort of chair, is it something that is easily movable, or there may be two chair choices so they can either sit closer or further away, for example. I'd also consider having some sort of surface for your client to be able to set their things down, even if they don't have actual things that they need to sit down. It kind of offers a psychological sense of like, you are welcome here. So it could be like a proper coffee table like I have here, or it could just be like a small side table, where they could set something down if they need to. At the very least, you need a spot to put your tissue box. And I also like to put a little desk clock there for me to be able to keep track of time. So I'm not like glancing up at the wall clock all the time through session. I can just do little glances at the table to make sure that we're keeping track of time. Okay, let's talk about lighting. Lighting is so important. And I'm personally, I'm a highly sensitive person. So I'm going to be the first to complain about lighting if there's something going on with your lighting. But if your office is exclusively lit from overhead lights, whether they're fluorescent lights or not, then it's going to be a strain on the eyes. It's just something about the way that the shadows fall on our faces. It makes our face look much darker than the rest of the room, and it's a lot of work for our eyes to focus on. Actually can use up some of our brain power adjusting our eyes to the lighting. So if you can have more lighting that falls at eye level or just like an array of different heights, maybe you do have the overhead light, but you also have a desk lamp and maybe a floor lamp, then that's going to balance out the lighting in the room. And it also makes it just feel a lot more comfortable. If that feels way too complicated, then just a general rule of thumb is it's much better to have several softer lighting sources than like one really bright light source. And that's going to make it much more comfortable. This is also very much Marie's opinion, but I'm going to put it out there because it's my episode and I can do whatever I want. And my encouragement with lighting is to use soft white or warm white light bulbs, not daylight or bright white light bulbs. Those daylight light bulbs, when you have them inside, unless you're doing like the light therapy lamp thing, in my opinion, they just don't have a place inside. That white light is just straining on our eyes, in my opinion, and the softer light is much easier for our eyes to process. The next thing that I think every office should include in some capacity is textiles. Textiles help elevate a space from like sterile and overly clean to like soft, cozy, and homey. And even if your style is something that's very minimalist, like maybe you have a minimalist design style, there are still textiles in those spaces, even if they're kept to a minimum. Textiles are basically anything that's like soft, plushy, fabric-y, that you can add to a space. So that could be curtains, pillows, blankets, rugs, even wall hangings. I mean, I have a textile wall hanging in my office myself. All of that helps the space feel more cozy and also really helps with soundproofing your office. So win-win in my opinion. Also about the rug, I found this recommendation at some point years back and I've always stuck by it. And that's if you can have a rug placed in such a way that both your feet as the therapist and your client's feet are touching the same rug, even though you may be sitting relatively far apart, then that can offer a connection point in an appropriate way where you're not actually touching each other, but there's something that's sort of drawing a bridge between the two of you. And I heard that somewhere, however many years back, and I've just always stuck by it and appreciated that like little minute detail. I know some of these things start to feel like really minute specific details, but they tend to live in that camp of like when you walk into a space and you say, I can't quite put my finger on why, but this space just feels really comfortable to me. Or you walk into a space and you go, I can't explain why, but I just don't feel super comfortable here. A lot of times it's these like finicky little tiny details that start to come together and make us feel more comfortable. So it's worth being specific in how we name them. Another design element to include is wall decor. You do not have to get fancy with your wall decor. You do not have to get the most expensive piece of art. But blank walls just really feel sterile. Like to me, it kind of almost feels like a hospital room or something like that. Like even your doctor's office has some stuff to look at on the walls, right? So even if you're just getting some frames that match your design style and you're getting some free printables that you get printed out at like a Kinko's or something, or you order maybe a cute picture that's cheap but on Etsy, there are a lot of ways to put things on your walls that don't break the bank. My interior design friend who helped me design this office space recommended these long picture shelves from IKEA so that I could fill an entire wall space, not just with photos, but with other design elements that align with the design of the whole office. And that was a good tip because, you don't have to get expensive stuff to fill up a picture shelf, but it fills up a wall. So that's one strategy. Also, when it comes to whether you should post your credentials on the wall or not, I personally think that if you have the option to put your credentials on the wall, it is a good idea. There's even like research somewhere citing that people feel more comfortable the more credentials a professional has on their wall, which, I mean, that's just how psychology works. So since you have the credentials and you are legitimate, you can put them on your wall to help your clients feel more comfortable. You don't have to have them right front and center eye level for your clients, but somewhere where they can see it in the room. And the last little bit of design element that I suggest you at least consider including in your office is plants. even if you just have one super easy care plant, it makes a difference. It literally brings life into a room. And of course, having natural light really helps with keeping your plants alive. But even if you have a low light or no light room situation, you can go with a plant like a snake plant or a pothos, both of which I have in my office. And a lot of times those plants can stay alive for quite a while just from the artificial light that you have in your office. So if you're sure you're going to kill a plant, don't get one. But if you think you might be able to water a snake plant from time to time, and give it a try. And of course, if any plants look more than half dead, don't leave them there. With all of these design elements in mind, you just go ahead and plug all of them into RoomSketcher. Yes, I design it all the way down to the plants and the lamps and the rugs, just so that I can get a feel for what's going on. I get that if you made it to this point in the process, you've already put a ton of work in. But let me remind you, at this point, you've also spent $0 on designing your office, and I think this is going to make the rest of the process much easier for you. And if you are using an app like RoomSketcher, they have this feature where you can set up a little digital camera inside your room and take photos of the room so that you don't just get the bird's eye view of the room, but you can actually feel like you're standing or sitting in your digital office with your furniture all set up, however you've set it up. And I will just take those photos from lots of different angles, save screenshots of them, and then rearrange the furniture, take photos from that perspective. And then I kind of look at all the different photos side by side to help me what kind of layout and design works best. And now, finally, it is time to go shopping. I recommend starting with your most expensive items first, just to help you stay in budget, because even those tiny little things, it's easy to blow budget on like a picture frame or something like that. So start with the big items, make sure you know how much those are going to cost. And if possible, if you're buying everything new, like from an online retailer, I recommend having everything in your cart all at once. And maybe you're shopping at a bunch of different stores, but for each store, have everything sitting in the cart in a different tab, and then make sure that the math adds up in your budget. All the way down to the coasters if you want to. If you have it all in your cart, but you haven't bought it yet, then you know exactly how much it's going to cost you before you bought anything. I know not everyone has the luxury of like buying everything at once, but if your budget is sitting there in your pocket, this is a great way to go about it. Before you drop something into your shopping cart, make sure you check the measurements of that furniture item and then adjust the measurements of that item in your app. Like if you're using RoomSketcher and you just put like a placeholder couch, the dimensions of that placeholder couch are probably not going to be exactly the same as the one that you're eyeing to buy for your office, but you can adjust those measurements. So go ahead and make those adjustments, because sometimes an inch or two is the difference between like this couch totally works, so like I can't even fit this through my door. So my strong recommendation is to adjust the measurements of each furniture piece in your app and check that it still works before you add an item to your cart. Now, this is the part where the design style you chose really comes front and center. As you consider dropping items in your cart, just make sure they check the box of one of these elements that you decided on before. You know, if it's a piece of upholstered furniture, does the upholstery color match the color that you chose? If it has wood in it, does the wash of the wood match what you chose? If it has metal finish, does it match what you chose, etc.? And that's the piece that's going to help your design feel super cohesive. Now, of course, you do want balance across all these different things. Like I have blue as an accent color in my office, but like if my couch and my therapist chair and like all of my other decor was blue, because I could say, oh, it's blue, it matches my design style, my office might not quite look the way that I want it to. So make sure, of course, there's balance across, you know, you have some upholstered items, some wood items, or whatever elements you have at play. You're not just getting all of the same type of element that's overpowering the space. Now, because you've measured everything down to the minute detail and hopefully plugged in all of those measurements into the design app, then if you want to, you can buy all of your purchases all at once. And as I mentioned, not only does this help with making sure you stay in budget, but at least for most of us, we're trying to get into our office seeing therapy clients pretty soon. Maybe we're moving from a sublet situation into a full-time office, or maybe we're switching from a virtual practice to an in-person practice. We probably can't spend months and months just like slowly bringing in design pieces into our office. So it's kind of nice if we can kind of get it all in pretty much at the same time. So if you're in that boat, because you took all those measurements, you can go ahead and buy every single little bitty piece you're putting into your office, like all the way down to the coasters and the pillows and the wall decor, because it's all measured out. Or if you have the luxury of a bit of time and you're not in a rush, you can certainly start by buying like your main furniture pieces and then add things in after you kind of see everything in place. And certainly, even if you buy everything at once and you put it in the room, once it's in the room and you're looking at it, there's inevitably going to be some stuff that you end up tweaking or realizing like, oh, I forgot to buy this. It's normal. That's what happens. And so you can add those things in. Like I think when I designed this office, I forgot to get a trash can for a really long time. I don't know. You just forget things. So that'll happen. Of course, as I've been talking, I'm talking like you're putting things in an online shopping cart, because at least I think most of us shop online these days. I don't know. Tell me if you're shopping in person, but you can also go to the store and like order an item and have it delivered, or whatever route you end up doing it. That's totally acceptable too. I just haven't really done that in a long time. I don't know. Do you all shop online mostly for furniture stuff, or do you still go to the store? Whatever route you go, once your stuff is all in your office, then take a look at it. Like, is it missing anything? Could it do with like, I don't know, a little knickknack? Again, don't fill your whole office with like just a bunch of cluttered knickknacks, but you know, a well-placed knickknack or two can make all the difference and make it a little bit more personalized. Something I like to include in all my office spaces is something that I've made by hand. I don't go telling my clients that I like made stuff in the office, but because I'm so interested in DIYing things, I crochet, I knit, I do a lot of things like that. I like to incorporate some of my handmade items in the office. And to me, it just feels a little bit more homey. So in this office, I have the blanket on my couch, as well as this little like hand knit, arm knit pillow, which my clients don't know that I made those, but I do, and it feels a little more homey. Of course, you don't have to go and hand make items for your office. I don't expect you to do that at all, but you could peruse through, like if you have a storage bin of decor that you haven't taken a look at in a while from your home, like take a look through it. Does anything fit the decor style of your office and kind of fit in just the right spot? Maybe it's that little knickknack that you bought on your travels just would fit just right on your picture shelf and fits with your design style. Or maybe there's that little surface that could really do with a vase and you have just the vase for it. If you pull in an element or two of stuff that really feels like it's yours, then it makes the space feel more authentic and personalized. And of course, in balance, right? Like we don't want this to feel like your college dorm room plastered with like posters of your favorite bands or whatever. I don't know what was in your college dorm room. I think I had a massive poster of like a cat or something. Keeping your clients' needs in mind, you can personalize it with just little appointments here and there. And my last tip, but maybe the most important tip out of all of the tips, is it? I don't know. You tell me. Maybe I said that from some of the other tips, but it feels so important to make sure that you avoid clutter, like at all costs. Listen, I've had some therapists myself whose offices were extremely cluttered, and it's just, I wish I could be the kind of person to be like, I get that it's cluttered, but that's not what we're here for. We're doing therapy right now. I am looking at that clutter the whole time going, why do you have a giant stack of books or papers on your desk on the floor? Why is there just like a pile of things coming out of a basket? I don't know. Maybe that says more about Marie. It probably does. Nonetheless, I do hold the opinion that clutter does not belong in our therapy office. So here's my tip for you. If you are prone to clutter, and believe it or not, despite what I just said, I'm very prone to clutter. It's just therapy offices that I can't handle the clutter in. Just have a designated clutter spot. Don't turn to it as like a default for where things go. But if you're about to see a therapy client in 5 minutes and you got clutter going on everywhere, put everything in that drawer, put it in a box, put it in a cabinet, have a spot that has empty space in it so that in a pinch, you can put your clutter in there and your client doesn't have to see it. I definitely do that. I have a lot of clutter in my bookshelf behind me, and I also have a little drawer in my desk that's just kind of perpetually full of clutter. Am I embarrassed about it? Do I wish I cleaned it out more? Yes. But does my office look clutter-free when my clients come in? Yes. So, you win some, lose some. We don't need our clients to carry our clutter for us, right? I don't know. Therapeutically, I think it just makes the most sense. Well, I covered like so much stuff in this episode. I can't even believe it. If you've hung out for the extended cut version of this, I hope my thorough discussion of like how to actually do the design is helpful to you, because I don't often hear folks talk about that. And I remember like finding it so helpful when I figured out how to pick a design style, how to plug things into an app. That made all the difference for me. So if you're in the same boat as me, I hope you found it helpful. Now, if you feel totally overwhelmed by this whole thing, find a friend. I mean, if you have budget for an interior designer, go for it. If you're on a budget, find a friend who's good at this kind of thing. Find a therapist friend. If you have a therapist friend who has an office that you like, say like, can I like significantly be inspired by your design style? Please help me. How did you do this? Because yeah, it can get overwhelming. It's a whole skill set that they don't teach us in school, but I think it is important to have our offices feel comfortable and be the right fit for the types of folks that we work with. That was enough for a day. I feel like I've been standing here for a long time. For those of you who are just listening, I decided to do this episode standing up, and I don't think that's going to be a regular thing, but I enjoyed it for today. Well, I had a lot of fun scripting and recording this episode. I love talking about office design as like a total amateur. Like, it's fun stuff to me. So I hope you found it helpful as well. Let me know what sort of design tips and tricks you found helpful when designing your office. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.